Well, thank you for joining us this evening. We're so pleased to have Jenny Irene Miller, Raven Moffett, and our very own Turchin Center's Shauna Caldwell with us from New Mexico, from Arizona, and right here in Boone, North Carolina, to discuss the artwork currently on view in Gallery A at the Turchin Center for the Visual Arts. The artwork is part of, this programming is part of the To Remain Connected exhibition, and I'm Marianne Redding, curator at the Turchin Center. Tonight, each of our guest curators will share a bit about their experience working on this exhibition, and artist Jenny Irene Miller will also delve a bit deeper into their artistic practice and works included in the exhibition, which will be followed by a question and answer. So if you have questions you'd like to ask during the talk, please submit them at any time using the chat feature. After the presentations, all the questions will be forwarded to me to ask during the Q&A. So before we begin, I'd like to take a minute to recognize that the land we meet on here in the mountains of Western North Carolina holds a very complicated history. Appalachian State University has undertaken a multifaceted research to understand and acknowledge that history in a way that will honor and actively support our Native communities and our neighbors. Until this research results in a detailed acknowledgement, we take now time to pause for reflection, and we encourage you to take time to learn and to consider your personal responsibilities to your own communities. Let's take just a few minutes. Thank you. The 2021-22 Art Talk series hosted by the Turchin Center for the Visual Arts is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Rosemary Horowitz, a cherished member of the Appalachian State University's art community. Dr. Horowitz was a loyal patron of the visual and performing arts. She passionately believed in the importance of educational programs designed to encourage artists with audience across our campus and community. Based on her commitment to using the arts to advocate the university's teaching mission, this evening's art talk is dedicated to Rosemary's memory. Now I'm happy to introduce you to the guest curators and artists of To Remain Connected. We're going to share a video of the installation and artwork in our gallery as I talk to aid in envisioning ourselves experience the work in person with one another. If you are local and have not seen the exhibition, I encourage you to visit. Masks are required. Oops, now I've lost my screen. Hold on just a second. Okay, I'm back. I encourage you to visit. All masks are required when you come to the Turchin Center. So many of the nuances of the artwork that you see are best seen in person. Our first guest tonight is Jenny Irene Miller. She is originally from Nome, Alaska, and is currently based in Tewa Territory in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Jenny works primarily with the medium of photography. Her practice is grounded in storytelling and identity, from ingenuity to queerness, as well as familial and community relations. Jenny is informed and inspired by kinship. She is currently a Master of Fine Arts photography candidate at the University of New Mexico. That degree is expected in spring of 2022. Jenny is also a Site Santa Fe Scholar and a past Elizabeth Ferber Fellow and Fulbright Canada Killiam Fellow. Jenny received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Photomedia and a Bachelor of Arts in American Indian Studies from the University of Washington. Her work has been exhibited nationally, including at the Anchorage Museum, the Portland Art Museum, Site Santa Fe, Penumbra Foundation, and the Southampton Art Center, among other venues. Jenny has also exhibited internationally at the Winnipeg Art Gallery in Canada and the Incheon Open Port in South Korea. Jenny is a recipient of awards from the Alaska Humanities Forum, National Geographic, Fulbright Canada, and a Fulbright Canada Killiam Fellowship to Canada. Her work has been published widely, including in the Inuit Art Quarterly, the New York Times, National Geographic, Forum Magazine, and Lenscratch, among many others. Our second guest tonight is Raven Moffett. Raven is an artist and educator working on Tohono O'odham and Paskey Yaqui land in Tucson, Arizona. Raven's poetic and lens-based artwork arises from examination of home and origin as a third culture, biracial, and diasporic Blackfeet white queer artist. She engages embodied performance, welcomes glitch work, and invokes multivocality of land, more than human kin, and ghosts in the technology of craft visual narratives which address trauma, healing, survivance, and home building. Raven received her undergraduate degree at Appalachian State University, holds a graduate certificate in museum studies, and is currently a video imaging MFA graduate student at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Our third guest tonight is Shauna Caldwell. Shauna is a white Appalachian artist, educator, and scholar rooted in her hometown of Boone, North Carolina. She uses multimedia and photographic processes to honor land, familial connections, sacred relationships, and transformation. Through her work, Shauna explores collaborative opportunities for the expansion of Appalachian placemaking through the arts and loving community. Shauna received BFAs in both studio art and art education, an MA in Appalachian Studies, and Shauna is currently pursuing an advanced graduate certificate in nonprofit administration at Appalachian State University. I will now turn the screen over to our honored guests.
Hi, everyone, and thank you again for the lovely introduction. So I work as the Assistant Director of Arts Education and Outreach at the Turchin Center and was asked to guest curate this exhibition that would include some of the Inuit artworks that we care for in our permanent collection. I was really excited about the opportunity, but I knew right off the bat that as a white woman with little to no formal curatorial experience that I was going to need some help from folks who knew more about curating than I did, specifically curating Indigenous art, and from folks who had lived experiences to ground some of the more important decisions that needed to be made. So I quickly asked Raven if they would be interested in being involved, and they also quickly jumped into the process with me. Raven, as Marianne said, went to App for undergrad and worked at Turchin for several years because she was so interested in the Inuit art in our collection. So she and I did a lot of work together in learning about the communities that the work was made by and within, as well as about the artists who created it. We then invited Jenny to co-curate with us because her voice and perspective as an Inupiaq artist making work today is really important in expanding the stories that are held within the works in the Turchin Center's collection. So led by Jenny's vision to look at Inuit art making across generations through dynamic and evolving practices that uplift Indigenous resilience and joy, we started looking for threads of connection between the artists whose work we care for. The works in this exhibition hold stories told through interwoven and familial voices rooted in land, memory, and Inuit ways of being. But even though Inuit are linked together through art, language, and food, it's really important to know that there are a lot of unique Inuit communities from across all of the circumpolar north. And you'll notice if you've been to see the exhibit or explored it online, that we've made a point in the language we use to recognize that the names of these locations where Inuit communities reside have been renamed by the settler states that occupy them, because the Indigenous communities and the traditions in these areas have existed far longer than the settler states. But we're looking at work by intergenerational artists from these three specific communities and tying them together through storytelling, resilience, healing, and joy, as well as a bit of humor. And I'll share about the artists from the two communities represented by the works in the Turchin's collection, and Jenny will share more about their community through their work in a few minutes. So one of the communities represented in the exhibition is Ulukaktuk in the Inuvik region of what is now called Canada. And Mabel Nagiyok, whose work is to the right, started her artistic practice in her 40s at the Holman Print Shop, which is an artist collective in the community where local artists create drawings throughout the year. And several of them are chosen to be printed in editions that the collectives produce to be sold mostly to tourists or folks outside of their community. And Mabel and Elsie Klingenberg, who is also in the exhibition, alongside several other women artists, really revolutionized stencil printmaking at Holman by incorporating shading into their prints, which quickly became a trademark of the Holman style. And Elsie's father actually helped start the print shop in their community in the 1960s. And when speaking of her work, she says, "I like to tell the old stories so the children will remember." And Elsie went on to study fine arts at Aurora College and at Arctic College, and has taught workshops at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and was even featured on the CBC show Adrienne Clarkson Presents. Helen Klingenberg is Elsie's daughter and is an artist, but also served as the Nunavut Language Commissioner and was the first person in that position to speak fluent Inuit-Naktuin, which is an Indigenous Inuit language. And in a film by Real Youth, she says, "I'm a pretty independent person. I was brought up to be self-sufficient so that I can look after myself on the land and look after my family." Both Annie and Lipa Pitsiolak refined their printmaking and sculpting skills in the community of Pungnaktung after being forcibly coerced by the Canadian government to move there from their home on Baffin Island. They eventually decided to move back to their home to live off the land and to share those skills with their children. And both of their work looks at humans interacting with the more than human and the spirit realm, particularly within healing capacities. And both Tamasi Alikatuktuk and Solomon Karpik are Annie's brothers and were seen as leaders in their communities as well as prolific artists. Tamasi was also heavily involved in the Kikitani Inuit Association, which protects and promotes Kikitani Inuit social, political, economic, and environmental interests. So you'll see their community mindset through their work as well. Perhaps because of those leadership roles that they played, but they definitely have an emphasis on respect for their elders and to the land, which is another thread that you'll pick up on throughout much of the work in the show. So all of these artworks, besides the two photographs of Jenny's on the first slide, were donated to the Turgeon Center by H.G. Jones, who was a researcher and archivist who received many honors and awards for his contributions to North Carolina's visual history. His relationship with Inuit art and with the communities his collection is representative of began in 1971 when he first vacationed in Alaska and the Canadian Arctic. Jones would go on to visit these areas over 50 times throughout the next 30 years. And the Historical Society of North Carolina's biography of Jones states that his experience growing up during the Great Depression provided a framework of adaptability and survival through which he felt a deep kinship with the Inuit communities that he visited. So as a project of giving back to the communities and the institutions that supported his education, and as an attempt to share his own passion for Inuit artwork, Jones donated over 200 prints and sculptures to the Turgeon Center over the course of 13 years, and also donated a comparable amount of artworks from that collection to the Winnipeg Art Gallery in what is now called Canada. So it's such an honor to learn about these communities and to celebrate this work. And I look forward to continuing to learn through this experience and through the artwork and through the many conversations that are being led by Inuit artists and advocates right now. You don't have to know everything about the complicated histories that informed this show to make meaningful connections to the work. I certainly don't. But it's important to be curious and to ask questions. So don't be afraid to have hard conversations because you're scared of making a mistake or saying the wrong thing, because that is almost inevitable. But being vulnerable and is really crucial for us to continue learning and growing together. So I encourage you to hold that openness as we experience this exhibition together. And with that, I will turn it over to Raven to share her beautiful perspective on Indigenous provenance and some of the inspiration behind this exhibition as we learn to better care for the artworks in our collection.
Thank you, Shauna. Oki Nuxqua Tsanatapi. I introduced myself in the language of my matrilineal lineage, Pikuni or Blackfeet. not only to honor it, but also to acknowledge the tension between my work, which is rooted within Blackfeet context, and the perspectives of Inuit and Inupiat wisdom holders necessary for the complete provenance of the Inuit art collection that is the focus of my research. Collectively, I think we all carry the intention of deeper care for the work embodied through this exhibition and put into practice by our asking of critical questions. It is an honor to learn from Shauna and Jenny in this way. I'm currently speaking to you all, as was said, from Tohono and Pascua Yaqui land in Tucson, Arizona, where I did remote provenance work on the Turchin Center's Inuit art collection, which finds life in the current To Remain Connected exhibition, co-curated by the powerful creative work of Jenny Irene Miller and the incredible praxis of Shauna Caldwell, as well as my own work. A note to Indigenous listeners, this presentation, my segment, speaks on colonial violence. Please feel free to step away and prioritize your health. Excuse me. So I frame my creative research and arts praxis through the lens of visual storytelling, modeled after my grandmother's oral histories. If you'll be willing to indulge me in this area, I will frame my research for the exhibition, which I compiled in a paper entitled A Critically Incomplete Provenance of Inuit Art, through stories that ground my approach to provenance and research and extend beyond the bounds of my research as enacted praxis via the To Remain Connected exhibition. I don't have time to cover all the facets of my research here, and instead will focus on moments of discovery through my research process. This requires that I begin sometime in 2015. I was an undergraduate at App State, and I went to the Turchin Center to view their rotating contemporary art exhibitions and was struck by a seemingly haphazard installation of Inuit artworks. I felt a familiar shock. I had seen the installation of Indigenous work as filler before in many fine art spaces. The Inuit art that I later learned was donated from H.G. Jones was installed with no context for these makers' community, land, process, or individual being. So I applied to work at the Turchin with the hopes that I could enact change and voice my critique within the institution. After 3 years of working there in wide-reaching capacities, I was given the opportunity to do so on multiple occasions, and I'm still invited to work in this way while I pursue my MFA at the University of Arizona through this provenance research and as a co-curator for what I hope is a more honorable and reciprocal exhibition of Turchin's Inuit art collection, made even more urgent by the contemporary lens-based work of Jenny Irene Miller. My first task working through the Turchin's collection was to engage provenance research within a collection, to recognize life within an archive, and to confront the superstructures that establish, uphold, and operate arts institutions. Museums, galleries, and the fine art world are telling stories too, and they are biased. The life of an object, both in and outside of museums, are tied to the sociocultural and geopolitical structures within which they are held. Given that the prevalent institutions which house and display fine art are mostly Eurocentric, white supremacist, racist, colonialist, imperialist, capitalist, heteropatriarchal constructions, they operate upon and assume understandings of ownership and the contextual frameworks which govern ownership through a limited lens. Provenance research within the museological field is intended to encapsulate all that constitutes the life of an art object, which is seen as a lineage of ownership, often resulting in a Western capitalist understanding of an object's life. The superstructures that enact power relations in the art world limit the stories that are told about living artworks held and housed within arts institutions, but urgent calls for decolonization work to tell more complete stories. Decolonization is a broad, multifaceted, and ongoing process to complicating discursive fields with the intention of addressing, problematizing, subverting, and repairing the superstructures named previously, which frame and continually constitute the art world. Decolonizing practice within the art world has mostly focused on the realm of curation and exhibition. In the continual work of decolonization on museum practice, rethinking and reframing the archive and research surrounding it and particularly provenance research is an imperative next step. The archive, while an equally problematic infrastructure in and of itself, has often served as a fruitful place for mis- and underrepresented visual culture makers and creators to mine for intergenerational and communal threads, unearthing purposefully unseen legacies in which to situate their contemporary work. Given this understanding of the frameworks and systems acting upon, with, and through the museum and gallery space, my research is left questioning, can provenance research be decolonized? Provenance's entry into the museum world was itself uneasy. It was catapulted into action by the prevalence of Nazi looting, and illegal and unethical collection of antiquities and cultural artifacts, all of which have now substantially bolstered museum collections in the Western world. For many chronically underfunded, understaffed, and overworked arts institutions, provenance research feels out of reach. However, ethical and culturally appropriate provenance research is absolutely requisite work for decolonizing museum practice and ethical archival collections management and exhibition. This is about acknowledging that provenance research is ongoing because the lives of these objects and ancestors held hostage by museum collections continue. But if provenance can help situate a more complete contextualizing origin story, the future of these lives and accompanying provenance work then begins to engage urgent practices of decolonization. This is an example of the pre-existing provenance in the Turchins database. My work outside of this research engages glitch tactics as a method for Indigenous refusal and diffractive approaches to technology, which problematize the tools we use to make and see. As an artist, I'm fascinated by this image. It is a wealth of glitch work birthed from interfacing between analog and digital archives, again between continually updating digital archival programs and repositories. But as a researcher, this is difficult to translate for many reasons, and I must acknowledge the inevitability of gaps in my provenance research. But this is actually the critical engagement I want to push, that provenance is unending and ongoing, that the lives of these objects or ancestors outlive us in a quantum sense. All provenance is critically incomplete. When we can recognize the ongoing, shifting, changing nature of provenance research as offering an alternative way of narrating history of art, provenance research can and does constitute decolonial work in the museum space when it attends to the epistemologies and ways of knowing that are the most appropriate framework for performing its research. For the purpose of my specific research into the Inuit art gifted to the Turchin Center's permanent collection by archivist and scholar H.G. Jones, this calls for an Indigenous Inuit approach to provenance, of which I am unqualified to perform, but is built by the featured artists within the collection and continued through Jenny Irene Miller's contributions. Recognizing my inability to engage Inuit approach to provenance, I instead endeavored to engage a broad potential Indigenous approach to provenance. As an Indigenous approach to provenance may extend generations before and after the life of objects and individuals themselves, refuting singular origins confined by linear experiences of time, multiplicity, multivocality, plurality, and collective memory are also threads across many Indigenous approaches to archival theory and provenance practice. We must also attend to the sociocultural structures and paradigms that create, constitute, and maintain records within communities and examine who has access to these stories. I was drawn to the potential of digital archives to open up multiple avenues of access, even participatory archiving, wherein archival systems and databases can be created that are not mono-hierarchical, but more a web of linkages. Because a hierarchical framework hinders an understanding of the complex nature of relationships between records, creation, and collection, linked digital multivocal archives built through intergenerational participation by both academic and institutional archivists and represented communities would constitute a more complete and fluid approach to provenance, allowing for represented communities to control the form, content, context, and audience of their provenance. Indigenous provenance must allow for multiple origin points while simultaneously prioritizing the knowledge lifeways of source communities. In order to attempt a provenance of Turchin Center's Inuit art collection, I had to educate myself on the land, history, media, and family connections of the artists represented, as well as the complexities of H.G. Jones's expansive collection. While Jones's collection gifts to the Turchin Center were created by Inuit artists spanning multiple generations and a large geographical area, the majority of his collection was garnered from Nunavut artists, particularly from Pennatung. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this. As Shauna said, we will make mistakes, and there may be audience members who can correct me. So, like, I hope to learn some. A hamlet in the Kikitalu region in Baffin Island, who were creating work between the late 70s to the early aughts. It's clear to me within my limited research that an understanding of the land upon which Inuit art is made and Inuit makers call home is necessary for a complete understanding of Inuit art and potential Inuit provenance. While I certainly cannot claim to know the land, my provenance research began with it and rooted back to it continually, like in this work by Kenuak Ashivak. Her 1999 lithographic diptych Silivut Nunavut, commemorating the April 1st, 1999 creation of Nunavut territory. Carrying on a tradition of collective art making present in Nunavut communities, Silivut Nunavut was printed with the assistance of fellow Inuit artist Pitseolak Niviakshi, who helped translate the original drawing into a lithostone for its final print form. This collaborative creative process is common in artist co-ops everywhere and is particularly visible within the Turchin's collection and highlighted by To Remain Connected's emphasis on community. In my research, it was important for me to acknowledge 2 points of truth and tension at once, which were informed through Raini Flaherty's, one of the artists in the collections, personal testimony for the Kikitani Truth Commission, and Melanie McGrath's The Long Exile. The first being Inuit communities are vital, strong, self-reliant communities of makers. Their art is made with honor and has agency. When Inuit art is made for sale, it is fully aware and has complete agency within itself as a potential for a commercial item and a cultural item, which may be mutually informative. The second being Inuit individuals and families were forcibly relocated to remote outposts in the far northern regions of what is today called Canada in the 50s to establish claims of occupation on the land. Those relocated folks were cut off from their communities and were made to struggle in the land without the support promised by the Canadian government upon coerced relocation. As a potential way to ameliorate the cultural, economic, and mental emotional damage this ravaged on communities, the Canadian government began establishing craft schools and artist co-ops. While this legacy was born of colonial theft and violence, the achievements of Inuit artists are of their own making. Traditions were cultivated in these craft schools, and communities of established makers continue today and have presence in To Remain Connected's exhibition. When considering Jones's part in relocating much of this work away from its cultural context, I have to admit I was wary and biased. I will not recount a full biography of Jones, although this was an important component of my provenance research. His relationship with the Inuit art and the communities he sourced his art from began in 1971 when he first spent his first vacation in Alaska and the Canadian Arctic, as Shauna shared. In 2005, as a project of giving back to the communities and institutions which supported his education, and as an attempt to share his passion for Inuit art, Jones began a 13-year-long relationship with the Turchin Center by gifting pieces of Inuit art from his personal collection of over 400 art pieces. After submitting my research, Shauna informed me that H.G. Jones did restore a significant portion of his collection to Canada, although not Nunavut, including 140 prints by world-renowned Pentarung artist Andrew Kopic to the Winnipeg Art Gallery. In summary, a potential Indigenous approach to provenance must take into account deeper histories, stories, dispersed agents, and complicating superstructures beyond traditional provenance within the Western art world. Extending beyond my research, the next and most important step for provenance into the Inuit art permanent collection at the Turchin is to reach out directly to the artists like Andrew and communities represented with an invitation to include their voice in the archival and exhibition information contextualizing their work. I am convinced that working under the guidance of Inuit elders in conjunction with Indigenous archivists, a multivocal, participatory, and non-hierarchical digital archiving platform can be created and continually improved through the necessity of ongoing connections between Turchin and Inuit communities represented in its permanent collection. As Dana Taylor notes, it is impossible to think about cultural memory and identity as disembodied. I would like to close with admitting the ways which decolonial practice can easily slip into perpetuations of dominant colonial systems by acknowledging a shortcoming I had entering into this project. I was tempted in the drafting process of this work to bring Inuktitut into the exhibition and accompanying wall text. There is tension even in the inclusion of syllabics, a writing system that originally culminated with the Cree context by white missionary James Evans with the assistance of several Indigenous language knowledge holders, including Inuit knowledge holders who aided in the adaptation of this writing system to the Inuktitut context. Inuktitut syllabics hold official status in Nunavut and Nunavik. The restoration of Indigenous language alongside the recognition of multimodal and often multivocal collective memory are pivotal first steps in the decolonizing aims of Indigenous approaches to provenance and archival practice, and my intentions were based thus. But I was misguided in my choice, as I originally proposed titling this exhibition with an Inuktitut phrase relating to bridges. I was thinking of the cycles of bridge work these collected works have seen, embodied, and lived with, but the exhibition To Remain Connected is not a bridge. A bridge runs two ways at best. Inuktitut language speakers and consultants brought in by the Turchin Center and Jenny's work helped me to understand that this exhibition is a web where threads of grounding contact are dispersed, but all connected. Every movement within a web is felt in resonance across its structure. This web is tethered in Boone. It is born in the contributing artist communities, and hopefully by speaking to you all today, a thread has been woven and tied in Tucson. Acknowledging this, I must also make explicit that my provenance research is highly limited. It is my opinion that Jenny's contemporary work in dialogue with the collection does deeper and more urgently necessary provenance labor than my web-based research could ever do. The conversations continue, echo, and ground themselves in the land, bodies, kin, and stories Jenny tenderly brings forth. Deep thanks to Jenny, Shauna, and all of those whose hearts did the deep work required for this exhibition to be realized. And many thanks to all of my teachers in life, including my more than human kin and land. Iktugapi, that which is good. Thank you for your presence.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Shauna and Raven. It has been such a pleasure working with you both and learning from each of you. And it has been incredible to have my work featured alongside the talented Inuit artists featured in To Remain Connected. I also wanted to thank Shauna again and Hannah for their time and care with the installation of this exhibition, as well as others involved. And thank you to the rest of the team at the Turchin Center for making this a wonderful experience. My name is Jenny Irene Miller. My Inupiaq name is Wigamnu. Today's presentation from me will include a number of works currently featured in To Remain Connected, as well as other works in progress. Next, please. The circumpolar region is what we Inuit call home. We continue to live in our homelands in the empires of the United States, in Alaska, Canada, Greenland, and Russia. Next, please. I'm from Nome and come from the Inupiaq of Northwest Alaska. And if you look at the first slide, the bottom half, that's where Nome is located. Next slide, please. This map illustrates the many Indigenous place names that the previous maps do not include. This region was and is still home to many unique Alaska Native peoples. I like to start off all my talks with the recognition of place and where I come from. Place plays an important role in who I am and what my work is about. If I could boil down my work to one word, it would be home. Home is made up of community, family, non-human kin, and so much more. It's important for me to ground my viewers and audience in where I come from, so that perhaps those viewers who are not part of my culture may look at my work with a more informed perspective to critically analyze the work. I see my work as a form of visual sovereignty. Visual sovereignty, as Dr. Jolene Rickard says, and I quote, one of the most dominant expression of self-determination. Next slide, please. Just as my Inupiaq ancestors' identities are formed, my identity is shaped by the lands, the waters that we come from. I'm Kingikmut, which translates to the people of Kinigan. Who I am is formed by my relations to kin, to the land, to the ocean, my family, the community I come from, and those who I love. This photograph on this slide is an image I made during my first visit to Kinigan, the village of my maternal family roots. It is about 109 miles northwest of Nome. Next, please. I am an artist who primarily works with the medium of photography. I also use video and sound in my art practice when needed, which to remain connected features photographs, a video, and a sound piece I have made. My creative practice is informed by research. I continue to expand on an interdisciplinary approach that includes my family and communal oral histories and archives. Importantly, some of my research methods are derived from conversations with my relatives, elders, and community members. This image, it has been an important reference point for me in my current practice. My great-grandma's fancy fur parka, found in our family photographs, contains layers of information beyond a simple and uninformed read of the garment. Our Inupiaq clothing includes signals, information about the wear through pattern, cut, and abstract designs that silently communicate who they are, their gender, and what community they are of. Today, these designs remind us of who we come from. Our clothing is tied to place. It has also been used for protection from the harsh climate we come from. In my art practice, I also view clothing as a potent means one might use to reveal or conceal parts of their identity, their body, to communicate who they are and how they want to be perceived. I have been challenging myself with this task of bringing forward this idea of protection in a new way in my work. Next slide, please. I see this notion of protection showing up in my work in the form of refusal. To refuse is to exercise extraordinary power. I do this because as an Inupiaq person, many of our stories have been told by people outside of our communities, which can be dangerous. In that process, our stories have become disconnected from us and do not represent me. They exist as stereotypes and remain in the past. I have been thinking about the power I hold as an artist, especially when photo-based works are created, and how much information I choose to give the viewer and how much I choose to keep for myself. And I am thinking about how the refusal of information can, when I feel is necessary, protect the person or non-human kin being photographed or visualized. When employed, this strategy can enact a form of tension. It requires a close read of the work. Ultimately, who has access to all of the information? And what does that refusal do to the viewer? Does it cause discomfort or curiosity? As Deborah Bird has highlighted, to get in the way of settler colonization, all the Native person has to do is stay home, end quote. Indigenous peoples, and specifically queer Indigenous folks, are a threat to the empire simply through our existence. This threat is found within our refusal of the US empire's queerphobic and patriarchal principles. Standing our ground and taking up space as Indigenous peoples gets in the way of settler colonialism and is Indigenous refusal. Indigenous refusal has become an important theory to my work. Refusal 2020 also speaks to my refusal of the desire of the settler state to classify my Inupiaq identity based on my appearance and other colonial modes of measurement that cannot fully speak to who I am. With this video, I'm denying viewers the opportunity to classify who I am simply based on my appearance. Next slide, please. In Leg's Self-Portrait 2020, I have directed the focus of my lens onto myself again. This self-portrait is about queerness and my identity as a whole. While making this image, I was thinking about the following. What does it mean to be feminine? What does it mean to be masculine? What about a little bit of both? Who gets to decide? This piece utilizes deadpan humor and pokes fun of the pervasive standards of mainstream American culture, cleanliness and beauty, the dangers of the gender binary, and made up rules around who should and should not shave their legs. The sandal strap tan also indicates time and place. It tells the viewer that a lot of time is spent outside on the land, which is how I find my connection to place, on lands that I am a visitor to here in New Mexico. Next, please. Entitled 2020 is a standalone piece from a stage in my practice where I began to experiment with language in a new way to me through the inclusion of handwritten text. This photograph is also a way to celebrate the closed practice of Inuit tattooing, the artists found back home who have given me these tattoos, and the artists who have made the pieces of jewelry that I choose to adorn myself with. Next, please. This photograph and the following are a selection of images from my work in the In Progress series called Where the Tundra Meets the Ocean. Where the Tundra Meets the Ocean delicately renders family through photographs and the reactivation of family archival images and documents. This body of work centers Inupiaq and queer everyday moments and memories. Where the Tundra Meets the Ocean is an intergenerational dialogue between myself and my family members who have passed, the strong women in my life, and the soft moments found at home with my partner, as well as the spaces and memories where I feel safe. Moments highlighted in Where the Tundra Meets the Ocean, such as in the photograph Tea with Aka, presents a conversation I am having with my late great grandma over tea. The photograph features her teacup and saucer. I call my great grandma Aka because she was raised by my mom. She raised my mom, and that's how we've always referred to her, for other Inupiaq folks wondering about that. Through objects such as the teacup and by including myself through the shadow of the hand, this story serves as an act of remembering her. This process allows me to keep her close and not forgotten. In my art practice, I have been asking myself, how do I keep someone alive who has passed on, and how do I make photographs of them? Working with my family archive and building my personal archive is a form of visual remembrance and directly links the past to the future. It is a way for me to share traces of my family legacies. Inupiaq use oral storytelling to impart knowledge, share lessons, and keep one another alive. Native feminism also teaches us that storytelling and the act of remembering can serve as methods to keep people who no longer exist in this realm alive. Oral storytelling retraces origin stories, and by sharing them today, this process fuses the past to the present. My work is a form of visual storytelling, which directly aligns with remembrance and Native feminism. This is how I'm engaged with my history through the continuum of time. Threading together stage scenes, recreating moments that have passed, depicting a still life of a lock of hair following a haircut, or creating a scene where a conversation could take place, such as over tea with kin. These photographs render home through a lyrical quality where the past is infused into the present. These quiet moments are full of life. The interconnectedness of the photographs I have made and the reactivation of family archives thread us together and visually presents closeness in a larger conversation between my loved ones and I. This work highlights intergenerational sharing of knowledge, of history, of identity. The color palette in my work relates to home, to Northwest Alaska. While a good portion of these images were made in Alaska, a good number were also made in New Mexico. The pandemic has kept me from returning home as much as I would have liked, but I have found it a great challenge to make work about home while being away in my MFA program. The sometimes soft light renders the subject matter in a similar quality of light that would be found back home in Alaska during the winter months. The energetic light in others could be found on a summer day where the midnight sun shines intensely. Where the Tundra Meets the Ocean contains poetic whispers of kinship, which draws the viewer closer and asks them to slow down to engage with the stillness in the photographs. The viewing of this work is not to be rushed, which relates to Inupiaq concepts of time, observation as a key learning method, and the value of patience in my culture. Aka's tender note, New Fur, is the scan of an archival photograph with a handwritten note on the back, which I believe is my great-grandma's handwriting. This image speaks to love, care, to what is not only inside of the frame, but what is outside of the frame. I've been thinking about the unseen in this piece. While reading this note, I felt the love my late great-grandparents shared for each other, and I felt a connection to them more through this note. I see the story of a skilled hunter presenting his wife, who was a skin sewer, with a new fur. And perhaps that new fur became her sunshine ruff found on her fancy fur parka. This piece is about tender love, and those who come from the community I'm from will also recognize this. I also want to mention that this body of work and how the work is installed into Remain Connected is presented in vignettes that are not organized according to linear time, but rather by relations being formed by the subject matter and the memories. Mom, Aka, and Grammy is about generational strength, love, and Indigenous joy. My mom holds an archival photograph that features my late Aka and my late Grammy. Subtle notes of Inupiaq identity are shared through the coded visual language, such as the cultural garment worn by my auntie and the inclusion of the bodies of water from my ancestral village, which are significant because that's where our stories begin. I am disrupting the master colonial narrative and reimagining what kinship and Indigenous love looks like through my work. This work in progress references my view of home, of personal memories of my great grandma's living room, and so many homes in Northwest Alaska through the layout of the works. I've been thinking about how many photographs of loved ones were displayed on the walls of elders' homes back home in Alaska. Frames of all sizes graced the walls featuring kin. Portraits were layered through small acts of safekeeping by tucking frameless photographs into the corners of the frame where the glass and wood met. This work in progress is inspired by those modest yet significant gestures of keeping loved ones close, as I remember from childhood. I have obscured some of the faces in the archival images through an act of protection, similar to my other work. This idea of activating the corner and it being a site of coming together is of interest to me. It is a space I have been thinking about since 2019. The corner can also reference a triangle, which is another coded visual language found in our tattooing. I'm still navigating this mode of working and what this will become, or what works this mode of production can and will transform into. And that's the end of my slideshow. Thanks everyone for your time, and thank you, Shauna and Raven, for your great presentations as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Raven. And thank you, Shauna. We're now going to turn to the question and answer part of tonight's presentation. And if you haven't already, please feel free to add your questions to the chat. The first question that we have is really for all three panelists. What were some of the best aspects and what were some of the most challenging aspects of co-curating this exhibition? And how will you draw upon those experiences for your future projects? Shauna, do you want to start?
Sure. I will say one of the biggest challenges, I think, was the pandemic, just in forcing a distance between us and not being able to be in the same space or to look at the work together, along with like really practical things like the supply chain and all of that stuff that kind of set us back on our timeline. But the best parts of this work has been, I feel like, our collaboration, and I've learned so much about vulnerability through this process, and we were afforded a really luxurious timeline to be able to do that kind of research that we felt was necessary, and we've only really just scratched the surface. But I think being able to build these connections and form these relationships has been really exciting for me, and I'm excited to go forward with that. What about you?
Could you repeat the question, Marianne?
Sure, of course. The question was, what were some of the best aspects and what were some of the most challenging aspects that you thought experiencing when you co-curated this exhibition, since all three of you were equally involved, and how will you draw upon those experiences in future projects?
I can go ahead and share my feedback on that. I felt like it was a really great experience because I got to meet Shauna and Raven and learn from them both. And also I feel like this type of project shouldn't be done alone. And we were all able to bring all of our perspectives and our knowledge forward. And I feel like come up with a really wonderful show. And some hard parts about it was narrowing down what work would be included.
Yes, so particular to my work in doing research, there were just a lot of exciting new discoveries, which complicated, what do we include? Maybe at one point, the collection, we thought we knew all of the pieces that we had access to, and then we would discover new work, which was beautiful. And I'm so glad that we were able to do this collaboratively and make those discoveries that needed to happen. Those works need to come to life and be known about. But it was a challenge, obviously, even outside of the pandemic, just being based in very different places and just, time and trying to meet, and knowing that Jenny and I are both in our final year of our MFA programs, and Shauna is always the most busy, just normal human meeting struggles. But it was a complete honor, and it has influenced like how I approach curatorial work and practice, learning from both of you all and then all of the voices present. I feel like it was an incredible educating experience for me, and to be able to work in community and see that as a model moving forward is something that I really want to hold on to, particularly in thinking about collections management, but also in thinking about how we're able to access work, using this as a launching point to increase accessibility, to increase multivocality, to layer stories, and to build more complete and more complex narratives that are more widely able to be seen and participated with and questioned.
Great, thank you all for answering that question. The next question comes from our audience, and it's a question for you, Jenny. The question is that the photo with the yellow flowers stands out as a uniquely different piece in the exhibition. Would you mind expanding on that beautiful image for us?
Sure. Thanks for that question and that feedback. For me, that photograph is very delicate, but also very rough. The plastic background, the scratches in it actually remind me of maybe ice from back home, and also the delicate flower. You know, all of my work is about kinship, so thinking about non-human kins and celebrating them as well, but also thinking about some of the garments that you see, in particular the one that my auntie's wearing, the floral designs on it. I feel like that kind of brings you back to think about the land as well in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Raven. Raven, part of your research is about the glitches as a potential space for Indigenous refusal and for acknowledging the expansiveness of Indigenous storytelling, as well as the limitations of museums and their databases to hold that knowledge. So not everyone in the audience may be familiar with glitch work. Can you explain what that is before you sort of expand on the lives of the objects and how you might utilize glitch work in other ways?
Well, that's a big question, which I'm excited to try to talk to. First, I'm going to plug Legacy Russell wrote a book, Glitch Feminism. It's a manifesto, and I'll put it I'm sorry, my More Than Human Kin are very excited about glitch work. I'll put a link to it in the chat, but it's thinking about how intimately intertwined our lives are with technology. I think about that in terms of visual culture, but it's inundated in all aspects of our lives. Many of us, maybe not all of us, but many of us. And they become capsules or containers and narrative holders. The technology itself does, right? So they're telling stories. So something, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about another theory, but another theory that I bring in is post-human theory, which is kind of subverting an anthropocentric or human dominant narrative. And a key part of post-human theory is acknowledging the agency of materials outside of the human realm. So it can be more than human kin, and this can be taken to mean animals, plants, or it can be technology itself and material agency. So thinking not only with the interfaces with which we experience technology, but the actual materials that build them. They're palimpsestuous narratives in and of themselves. So that's kind of maybe a little bit of groundwork. Glitch tactics open ourselves up to being excited about the moments where tech fails us. When we first opened this Zoom call, Christy was echoing back. Echoes are beautiful. They're ways that our words return to us magnified. We're able to hear them once again. maybe it's not what we desire out of a Zoom call, but how can we play with the agency of the material adding to our narrative and the way that we tell stories? Okay, so that's glitch tactics, that's that part. And there was a component of this question, thinking about it in my work, thinking about it in institutions.
Mhm.
And please let me know if I'm missing anything. I guess I should also say that, and I hope I'm not belaboring this. Thank you, Shauna, for putting that in the chat. Stereotypes of Indigenous peoples often create a violence that negates our access to technology, even though we have been agents using technology from beginning times. Although it may look different than Western, colonialist, heteropatriarchal viewpoints want to depict, we have always been agents collaborating with technology. And I'm using this as a very broad term, right? In particular, legacies of photographs, right? So there's that component as well. Within my work, I'm interested in pushing different technologies. I work with lens-based work primarily, so video and photo, and I want to show the seams. I think about my still images as singular beads in a larger beadwork piece. So moments where you can kind of see diffraction, where you can see through, where you can begin to see the bones of the tech that I'm working with. You could think of Suhuko's work, Stephanie Suhuko's work, who I'll also put in the chat, as making the process, the collaborative process of editing and creating a compiled image that is a final image as a collaboration. So it's no longer singular, just like this exhibition could not be a singular endeavor. We have to have layers of narrative. How that looks within museum archives is thinking about, rather than thinking about the limitations of technology, is thinking about how they function in storytelling and how they can provide greater access. How we can lean into the moments where what we wanted to happen didn't happen and something unexpected occurred. How we can give agency to not only the narratives, the ancestors, and the objects materially present, but also a digital space that we all interface in. So I'm sorry, that was a very long answer, but I hope I maybe got some of it.
Thanks, Raven, you did. And actually that generated a question from Denise Ringler. And she first has a comment. Thanks to the panelists for the deep dive into the exhibition and all of your perspectives on provenance and the ethical obligations of museums in presenting Indigenous work. So her question then is, are there museums that you know of where you feel are a model that the Turchin Center and other primarily white institutions can look to in approaching these issues?
I have a couple. If anyone else wants to speak, I'd love to open it up because I just talked at length, and I'll get links before I say, oh, I'll put them in the chat.
Okay.
I don't necessarily have a museum in mind, but I have different scholars that have work that you could perhaps look into and learn from, which I have done. So Dr. Nancy Myflow has a lot of really great scholarship. And then also Heather Atone has really great scholarship. And one exhibition in particular that I kind of spoke to in a talk this past spring that really blew my mind and felt very empowering was the Inua show at the Winnipeg Art Gallery that was led by all Inuit curators. And I felt that was really important to have that voice of someone from the community, from the different communities leading that project. But definitely Dr. Nancy Myflow and Heather Atone have great scholarship, and there's so many others that I'm failing to remember right now.
Thank you, Jenny.
Speaking of the Inua exhibition, the Winnipeg Art Gallery is a place that I look to, and at the beginning of this process and of thinking about curating this exhibition, because I'll share a link in the chat as well to their new wing that is dedicated specifically to Inuit art. And Inua was the sort of first exhibition in that space. And what I think that they've done really well is to talk about their collection, and they have tabs on their website that talks about the history of the collection and what the art gallery is doing to acknowledge that history and answer some of the harder questions. But having an all Inuit team kind of leading the way on that is really inspiring.
So I've looked at a couple specific projects, less so larger institutions, but I also think that there's something to be said for looking to tribal knowledge holders like tribal museums. And we can think with Lone Tree's work, decolonizing museums, as providing a lot of examples with her opinions on those. But for me, in thinking about archives in particular, and coming from my own community, the Pitt Rivers Museum in Alberta, Canada, had a project in 2010. There's a word for it in Blackfeet, but it's the Blackfoot Shirts Project. And these shirts are ancestors. They've been taken by the Oxford Museum, and they were on loan in a museum in Calgary, which is very close to our land, part of our traditional homeland. And so elders were able to come and hold ceremony and hold sacred space with those shirts. They sang songs, they were able to touch. So opening up things that museums often negate, because it's what's necessary for the futurity of those objects. We often think as knowledge holders within a Western colonial framework that we need to keep them away, they can't be seen by light, they can't be touched. This is doing a violence to those ancestors. It's not allowing them to return home. So that's one example. And then I'm struggling to find the specific example. I think perhaps it's called Mukurtu. It is there is a Aboriginal archiving, like digital interface that came out of what is now called Australia. And basically what it did was it allowed tiered access to different materials and ancestors and objects through the same way that if you were to go to like a brewery's website or like a dispensary's website where you have to indicate your age, you have to identify yourself and your standing and your identity in order to receive access to the appropriate information.
Thank you. This next question is from Hannah Bennett, and she says, "Hi, Jenny, this is Hannah. I was wondering if you would be able to speak more on your ongoing practice with utilizing corners and non-traditional spaces. Do you find this to be another act of refusal or an act of invitation, or neither?" And she goes on to say, Hannah goes on to say, "Thank you, Raven. Thank you, Jenny and Shauna, for being here. It is so wonderful to hear about your work and perspectives."
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, that's something that I'm really thinking about right now, because I have been pausing on that space of the corner since 2019. And originally that corner space was activated in my practice through a photograph, thinking about the corner of a space of loss. So this photograph that I was working on was called "Looking for My Language, Where My Grammy Was Forced to Leave It." And I felt like I didn't want to give so much power to some of that language suppression, because I already had in my past work. So I had been looking at the corner as a space of a site of coming together, and also those like how it can relate to our visual coded language within our tattooing, which also relates to so much significance on our parkas, and like where the positions of the tattoos are placed on our bodies can replicate where they are on the parka. So this space of the corner, I'm still really thinking about it, and I do like this like non-traditional space of showing work that's not being used, because within that I'm also thinking about um, the museum or the gallery space as perhaps not every gallery or gallery space should have our stories and should be able to show them as Indigenous artists. And maybe they don't know how to elevate them. And so I'm thinking through a lot of things right now. And I can't directly answer if it's another act of refusal or invitation right now. I feel like it's both. Within the modes of working with the images, and also the way that it's calling folks into that corner to embody it. I hope that's helpful, and that's the best that I think I can answer that question right now. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great answer. I think it gave everybody something to think about. Jenny, I'm going to ask you one more question that came up, and it refers to technology and your sound piece. So when visitors enter the gallery here at the Turchin Center, one thing that often surprises them is the sound piece that floods the space with the sound of breath, of breathing. Can you speak about that piece, its placement in the gallery, and its meaning in the installation?
Sure. So that's a piece from 2013, and I made that in Seattle when I was living in Seattle. So again, always thinking about home and how to place home in my work without not physically being there. So with that piece, I was actually thinking about closeness to family, closeness to folks. So specifically my mom, and how this act of hearing someone's breathing is such an intimate, like, it's so intimate to be that close. So that's called Close to Me self-portrait. I'm totally forgetting because it feels like forever ago. And my brain is kind of foggy these past several years with the pandemic. But yeah, so that piece, I was really thinking about this closeness, and also how this originally it had been shown as a 2-channel sound installation, so that you hear it and the breaths kind of move around you and you feel that presence of me. And so at first it should make viewers feel pretty uncomfortable, because we're not used to being able to hear an individual's breath unless if we're super close to them, or we're in, yeah, so it's different, it's made up of different breaths of mine after different activities, and composed in a way, again, like I'm physically also taking up space with my breath. So I see that as a sound self-portrait. And that piece is another, act of refusal, of not giving the visuals of what I look like or who's behind this breath. And I had been thinking about acousmatic listening, which is a term coined by Pierre Schaeffer, who's a sound artist. And basically it's there's a lot of power when you remove the visual and you only are encouraged to listen to the sound of something. So that really changes the way that maybe you see me or feel me, my presence with that piece.
Great, thank you. It really is a very, very powerful piece. And I'm going to use that to Shauna to ask you a question. What do you hope audiences will take away from this exhibition? What will linger with them?
Yeah, I am happy to answer this. And I also would love to know Jenny and Raven's thoughts about this question too. I guess my hope is that it will allow people a space to think about their connection to others and inspire their own sort of sense of self-reflection and curiosity. And in that, thinking about your connection to others and to your own community, like what stories are important to them and how do they want their stories to move forward and to be told by others. And thinking about responsibilities and what responsibilities to the stories do we have to complicate them, but to also carry them forward and to think about how they might evolve over time as our experiences change. But kind of going back to the breath and Jenny's sound piece, realizing the agency in all of the work and thinking about connection in a multifaceted way.
That's really beautiful because breath connects us to life. And that is part of your title for the exhibition, to remain connected. So I really like the way they reinforce each other.
Mhm.
So Jenny and Raven, would you like to jump in about what you hope the audience will take with them when they leave the gallery?
For my part, when I had the honor of being in the space on the opening night, some folks who had connections to the land in Alaska felt it present, felt a homesickness that is bittersweet. And I mean, I cannot speak for the intention of the artists represented, but I always I always have a hope that people are called home to the land. I hope that folks can think about hope that folks can think about the land that holds the exhibition space and their relation to it, and then the land that is brought in through breath and through imagery and through story. So that's for me.
Thank you. Jenny?
For me, I just really hope that folks will also acknowledge like whose land they're on when they're viewing the work, and kind of think about whose land they're on, where they call home, and kind of think about how they walk on that land, and how they caretake it. And also I just hope some of the stories, even though mine are a little more personal, that they could resonate with the different viewers, and they can maybe stories of their family, their ancestors, where they come from will be brought forward. But also I hope this really helps folks see, this is a small portion of Inuit artists featured, but I just hope that viewers will see the diversity, the intergenerational storytelling, and the power in that.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that's a really nice place to wrap it up, what we want people to leave with. So in wrapping up tonight's presentation, I hope our audience will all join me in thanking Jenny, Raven, and Shauna for graciously sharing their time, their research, their artwork, and their insights with us this evening. I'd also like to thank everyone who participated, for joining us and for sharing space with us in this digital realm that we are in right now. It's been so rewarding to celebrate these inspiring artists and curators, and for us all to connect through their work and the work in the gallery as we continue to cultivate community virtually. So thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to just remind everybody to check out our upcoming art talks on the Turchin Center's website. We'll drop that link into the webpage in the chat for you. So thank you again to everyone, particularly to our 3 honored guests tonight. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your evening, whatever time it is in your space right now. So thank you so much for joining us.